of my favorite world bosses in Genshin Impact has always been the giant Wolf of Wolvendom. Originally going by the name of Andrius, Lupus Boreas is a massive and powerful wolf-like spirit that roams and protects the dark and twisted forests near the edge of Monstadt. However, do not let his animal-like appearance fool you, as within his story holds a significant and incredibly powerful figure that played an important role during the fall of Decarabian, and is one of Lord Barbados' strongest companions. But before we get too far into his story, let's rewind things back just a bit and observe just who Lupus Boreas truly was. Before the events of the Archon War, there was once a vast variety of ancient powerful gods that had walked amongst the earth. Immensely powerful, near immortal-like beings that would grow to have their very own cult-like followings, some of which would use their powers through sheer brutality, while others were very merciful and even benevolent, such as the mighty snake of Urabashi, who still to this very day is loved and respected, even after his faithful demise. One of these gods was the Ice King, or betterwise known as Decarabian. He had founded the nation of Monstadt and was known to be dreadfully protective over his city, often making debatably unjust decisions in an effort to secure the society in which he had built, even easily later finding himself being labeled as a terrible tyrant. As the Archon War began to enter into effect, Decarabian would inevitably be challenged by another godlike being of near equal strength. Along with his own following, he would march towards his city, going by the name of Andrius. Andrius would relentlessly attack and rise against the Storm King, looking to defeat him and bring on an era of being chosen as the true Animo Archon. Keep in mind that this was well before Barbados had made his name known. This would cause Decarabian to seal his land into a massive storm shield, locking away the outside world and trapping his people within its walls. This area itself is also what we know as today as Storm Terror's lair. With the dome now fully up and the aggression of the two gods at an all-time high, we would go on to enter an important era in Mondstadt's history. This would be known as the Age of Kings, where the time would greatly focus on to these two powerful beings, dubbing Decarabian as the King of Ice and Andrius the King of Frost. The storm wall itself was practically impenetrable, and after countless attacks and raged outbursts against the construct, Andrius would find himself completely at a stalemate. However, during his attacks, he had left nearly all life and flora around the entire location absolutely decimated and covered in thick layers of ice. With only destruction now laying in his wake, Andrius would slowly begin to realize just how foolish it really was to even paint himself as a benevolent Archon. As while Decarabian would indeed eventually fall and would be usurped and defeated by Barbados and his people, meanwhile to Andrius, he had much more unsettling realities that he needed to tend to. He had realized that his freezing storms and methods of progression had only managed to take away life, not give it, as well as that he shared not enough genuine appreciation for humanity as a whole, tearing away any sort of last wish he had had for him to become their next leader, inevitably leaving Andrius suffering at the thoughts of his very own actions, wishing to give back to the world in some meaningful way. During this time, he would go on to vanish into the frozen tundra in which he had created, where he would no longer be seen for thousands of years. Speaking of which, jumping nearly 2,000 years later into the future, we see him once again here in Monstadt during present times, known to be the valiant protector over the land of Wolvendom, and has been entrusted by Barbados himself into becoming one of the Four Winds, now taking on the new name of the Wolf of the North. However, the wolf we see now is not technically entirely Andrius himself, or at least the very living and breathing god that we had just spoke of, as thanks to one of the many lore ramblings from Dainsleif, he would give us a very subtle heads up that Andrius did in fact pass away all those years ago.
No, that's not likely. Unlike Osile, who was just suppressed, Andrius died long ago. Today, it is just his spirit that stands guard over Wolvendom.
Presumably, this must have been right around the time he had found himself unfit to be the next Animo Archon, or he would give his body and his strength right back into the world himself. He would treat his death as a sacrifice, and saw it as no better way to give back to the world as going out in a noble way to finally give back to the world in which he had once hurt, giving his life force and preemptively healing it. Indeed, the world boss that we know of today is simply only the roaming spirit of a once great lord, And interesting enough is that many gods of his stature seem to have no power left within them to actually take on a real physical form. However, he seems to manifest himself using remnants of whatever is left of his freezing energy. Though it is also worth mentioning here that Andrius is merely a fraction of his former self, and that much of his original power has indeed been entirely depleted. For a couple extra lore tidbits here, now that most of his main lore has been wrapped up, Andrius is also known as the Knight of Boreas, which is also why he has been called Lupus Boreas, as he would later unknowingly take on that new title, as Monstadt always tends to tie prefixes such as knight or lion into their honorary title names. However, interestingly enough, this name title also belongs to someone else. No one else than Varka himself. That's right, the Grand Master of the Knights of Favonius, which has left some very peculiar suspicion from the community on whether or not he has some sort of underlying connection to Andrius. Though unfortunately, and as exciting as that sounds, we really have no idea. Time still hasn't really told us anything, and we haven't really had much Monstadt lore lately, so we're still kind of left in the dark, especially since Varka is, well, still gone. Finally, as another fun fact, if you remember the domain called the Temple of the Wolf, this location is actually the lore-accurate destination where Andrius has been worshipped all those many years ago, where he was either worshipped before or after his demise. But again, we don't really know when. However, it's also very obvious now that this place has definitely been long since abandoned, so whoever did worship him has not been alive for quite some time. As an additional fact, if you were to open up your Adventurer's Handbook, you will also find a note stating that Andrius was actually given his powers from an unknown ancient god. However, this is really the only time this fact is ever really stated in the game, and we don't have really any idea whatsoever on who exactly this unknown god truly was. But whoever it was possibly could have also been someone as well who had a problem with Decarabian. Also, there is still plenty that we can use to help tie in with Razor here, or with some events involving room guards, but I think this could be a fun idea somewhere later on down the road, especially since we haven't really got to cover Razor too much yet on the channel, so stay tuned! So, what do you guys think about today's video? I know it's a little random, it's a little weird, especially with Clorin just now dropping, but honestly, I'm still working on the kinks on a new story I'm doing with her, so bear with me. But what do you guys think about Andrius's past? Did you even know he had a past? Which topics would you guys like to see next here on the channel? Let me know down below in the comments, and even give some theories if you're up for it. Don't forget to come swing by our Discord as well, where you can see us chatting about lore, rambling about our favorite characters, or complain about how my upload schedule is absolutely terrible. Seriously though everyone, thank you just so much for watching, and as always, till next time, Samurai.